Good day, I am Earl P. Tongol, a quality improvement consultant and a certified ISO 9001:2015 Lead Auditor. I am here to give you an introduction about the implementation of a quality management system certified to ISO 9001:2015 and its applicability to government agencies in the Philippines. This session is a briefer on what to expect if you are planning for your agency's certification. If your organization is currently ISO 9001:2015 certified, or you're working towards it, this may also be a good refresher. As we face a pandemic, is it really worth prioritizing ISO 9001:2015 QMS? This system, following an international standard, may actually give you an advantage because QMS espouses continuous improvement following the plan, do, check, and act cycle or the PDCA cycle by Edward Deming. This means that ISO 9001:2015 implementers apply a more structured approach in dealing with their own organizational processes. QMS also considers risks and opportunities which, if were already identified by organizations prior an extraordinary circumstance such as this pandemic, well, the impact of such a situation may have been lessened or even mitigated. We will talk more about that in the succeeding slides. But in a nutshell, ISO 9001:2015 certified organizations may have the upper hand in terms of facing crisis. What comes into your mind when you say ISO? What are your thoughts? The words, the images that pop up in your head. Based on experience, the most common word I hear from colleagues and participants when they think of ISO is quality. Whether we are talking about quality products manufactured or developed by private organizations or services by government agencies, we expect as customers and citizens to receive outputs which are according to our standards. Some are even expecting higher. That ISO 9001:2015 seal or certification mark sets the bar a notch higher in terms of our expectations. For beginners, a way of understanding this technical topic is defining the words associated to it one by one. The term ISO is not actually an abbreviation of the International Organization for Standardization, but actually derived from the Greek word isos, meaning equal. What a perfect word to instantly relate to standardization. 9001:2015 belongs to a family of more than 21,000 standards, and this latest version ensures that stakeholder needs are met while satisfying statutory and regulatory requirements, and is generally related to the word quality. Quality itself. What client wants, the client gets. While a management system, according to the standards definition, is the way the organization puts its act together to attain its goals. I have compiled 10 frequently asked questions about ISO 9001:2015 QMS, which I hear from government agencies. We will answer them one by one in the succeeding slides. The first question is, why do we need a quality management system or QMS in the Philippine government? The Philippine government has already enjoined all agencies as early as 2006 to institutionalize QMS, even supplementing it with additional orders in 2007 and 2011. It is also aligned with RA 11032 or the Ease of Doing Business Act of 2018. Through EO 605, the Government Quality Management Committee was formed. Composed by various agencies, this oversight committee monitors the implementation of QMS in the Philippine government and even aligned it with a performance-based bonus. Because the system promotes efficiency and enhanced productivity, it is expected that ISO 9001:2015 certified organizations become recognized for service excellence. Thus, the various awards and commendations an organization may receive after its implementation. Question number 2. Is implementing a QMS certifiable to ISO 9001:2015 for government agencies easy or difficult? We can set a criteria to answer that question based on your organization's readiness or preparedness for certification. It would be less challenging for an organization if the following mechanisms are already present. What are these? First are the 7 quality management principles, which you can see on your screen. We have customer focus, leadership, engagement of people, process approach, improvement, evidence-based decision making, and relationship management. If you have these 7 quality management principles evident in the processes of your organization, then it would be easier for you to implement a QMS. Number 2 would be a semblance of a planning process coupled by monitoring and evaluation. Third would be strictly complying to the oversight agencies of the government, such as the Civil Service Commission when it comes to the personnel, the Department of Budget and Management, and the Commission on Audit for financial matters. Next is considering ISO as a priority program so that it is budgeted and considered first among the many projects of an organization. Truly, this will jumpstart the implementation of a QMS. Next would be sustaining it by integrating it with the processes of the organization, and at the same time having a good documented information or documentation of all the processes involved. Next would be having a sort of assessment or taking into consideration the risks and opportunities in the organization, whether you have a risk management team or identification of the risks, whether it has a high impact or a low impact in your organization. That would help a lot. And lastly, having a designated person or a set of personnel, a pool of leaders who will move the direction of the organization towards attaining the criteria set by the international standard. Well, that would help and make the implementation of QMS easier. The third question is, what's new about ISO 9001-2015? We have heard ISO 9001 in the year 2008, and this time the latest would be the 2015 version. Take note of the 3 things that are somewhat relevant and the changes that has been installed in the new standard. First would be the inclusion of risks and opportunities as part of the criteria. In this case, we have to identify the possible events which may happen or the possible situations which may happen, may or may not happen in our organization based on its probability, based on its impact, and the effect of these uncertainties should be determined. Next would be the more integrated approach, meaning it may be less on documentation, less on the mandatory documents before, but it should be integrated with other offices, other processes. And at the same time, the third one, the most important, would be leadership. In this standard, the quality management representative may not be a requirement, but the top management should prioritize ISO and should be aware of ISO. And this leads to a more important role when it comes to our CEO. The local chief executives for our LGUs should be involved in the management review. Also, our chiefs, our heads, of course, our secretaries of the departments, the commissioners, the involvement of the top management is highly emphasized in this latest version of the standard. Question number 4 is quite common. Who really grants the certificate? I get a lot of feedback from this when it comes to clients. They ask me if do I certify organizations, or sometimes the Development Academy of the Philippines is being asked, are you the ones who give the certificate, or some call it accreditation? Actually, it's called certification, and it is given by a certification body and not ISO itself, because ISO publishes the standards, creates the standards through a technical working group, and then there is an accredited certification body per country, which is accredited by the country's accreditation body. So accreditation is not compulsory. In fact, there are companies, there are certification bodies which do not necessarily have an accreditation in the local country, but it doesn't mean that it is not reputable. It's just that it doesn't have connection with that local government, or it provides an independence when it comes to the confirmation of their competence, and doesn't include the country itself when it comes to the determination of the certification body's competence. So in our case, in the Philippines, we have the Department of Trade and Industry, Bureau of Product Standards. You can check their website if you want to know if your certification body, if you will get a certification body, if you want a certification body that is accredited by the Philippine Accreditation Bureau or PAB, or you want it DTI accredited, you can check it in their website. So it is not compulsory among our certification bodies to be accredited, but it adds to their credibility. It adds to the confirmation of their competence. Question number 5 pertains to the extent of documentation which an organization should have. What is the extent of documentation should an organization have? As you can see on the screen, we have the documentation pyramid, the typical structure of a documentation for an ISO certified organization. On the first level, we have the records, which are evidences of what happened in your organization. Take note that ISO certification begins when we have launched the ISO itself. So all the records that are involved prior the certification should also be there as a reference. But of course, the current documents which are being used should already be in conformance with the international standards. The way you retain it, the evidences where you put your proof that all the processes happen, the logbooks, the documentation, the receipts, the copies of files of all their transactions are part of records. Now, this may also be called as documented information, wherein this should be preserved. And these are the bases when it comes to audit. Now, the second level would be the procedures and guidelines. Now, in our organization, these are maintained, meaning these are being revised continuously for improvement. And this involves the processes which are needed in order to provide the service. So this can be the step-by-step processes, which is being used by the organization in order to produce something or to give a service to a certain citizen. So these procedures and guidelines may come from national agencies and may have been derived from oversight agencies, but customized according to the needs of the agency or the certain organization locally. So what is important with ISO is that it is documented, the processes are documented, and we might call this as operational control. The standard operating procedures, the operations manuals, and all the mandated activities that every organization should do. Now, last would be the governing rules of the organization or the policies themselves. Now, these are mandated by laws, and this does not change. In fact, it is in the apex of the triangle, meaning it is the reason why government agencies exist. So, with all the policies, all of the guidelines, the rules and regulations, and the procedures and the records, we form a simple documentation pyramid that should be aligned with each other. And when we need to trace it, when we need to go back to it, and when we refer to it again, it is all aligned and in harmony with each other. So that is the extent of documentation. So that's why when we are asked, why does it seem like we need to write a lot of things, we need to document a lot of things, we need a lot of paper, we need to print a lot of manuals? Well, because if you are a starting organization and you haven't documented anything at all, that would be hard. But for organizations which already have simple documentation, a write-up, or flow charts, or even the citizens charter can be a reference when it comes to a documentation. So it really depends on on the type of documentation the organization has. Take note that this can be soft copy or hard copy, or the organization can decide on how they would like to preserve or make use of documentation. The sixth question is, what are the main ingredients in attaining ISO 9001:2015 certification? Well, almost all government agencies have their rules set. They have their mandates. They have their job functions. The employees have job functions. So what's more to do? there are two major things that ISO certification or ISO certified organizations should have in order to maintain and sustain this QMS. These are internal audit and management review. Internal audit is the process wherein other offices, other personnel audit or assess the implementation of ISO in another office. So this is a sort of check and balance and trying to uncover the gaps and improve some of the processes through an unbiased manner. Now, similarly, we have to report this to the top management. So there is a management review. Others may call it an ExeCom meeting, may integrate it with top management meetings, but specifically for QMS, ISO 9001:2015 requires a management review with a specific agenda wherein all of the results of the audit and other matters should be discussed with the top management. Now, integrated in the internal audit and the management review, you should have followed the ISO 9001:2015 clauses given by the standard. Then there are corrective actions out of the internal audit and maybe out of service realization. And after analyzing these non-conformities or NCs, you have to again assess or think about why these non-conformities or gaps happen through root cause analysis. So these are the main important things or the ingredients needed for you to say that, hey, we're applying QMS because we have internal audit, we have a management review, and we're following a set of standards based on the ISO 9001:2015 clauses, and then we do corrective actions, and we also analyze our problems. So if you have this essential activities and practices, you are on your way to become ISO certified. It seems as there are a lot of things to do. So question number 7 would be, how are we going to start? So 3 things. Number 1 is you should form a team. There should be persons or specific personnel who will be in charge of the implementation of ISO during the start. Because the personnel may be confused, maybe it may not be integrated if there will be no specific persons who will take charge and actually spearhead this new practices from the ISO. You have this documentation, you have this coding system, you may apply some improvements which will be carried on to other offices as well. So it's kind of new, and there should be people who are leading this kind of initiative. Next one is you should be trained in order to be competent when it comes to ISO 9001:2015. So there are a lot of courses or introductory courses such as this one that will give you an idea. Another training would be on the specific clauses of the standard. And of course, it is also a requirement to have a training for internal auditors. So without those trainings, without those certificates, it will be difficult for personnel to immediately go on board and apply an international standard such as ISO 9001:2015. So you need training. And the third one is the target. You need to set a target on when you want to be certified, what are the dates wherein you want to be audited, what would be your goals, when would you attain ISO certification. So this should be part of a bigger plan, an improvement plan that will be followed by the whole organization, because the activities will really overlap or even add on the different activities, the normal activities organization at first when you are still starting. So if you're gonna start it, remember the 3 T's, form a team, remember that you should be trained, and set a target. We now go to question number 8. How long will it take before I get ISO certified? Well, I want you to remember 4 words. It's just that you should squeeze your time, integrate it as much as possible to your normal system, implement it right away, and prove that ISO is being done in your organization. And how do you do this? Number 1 is to plan. And when you plan, make sure you write it down. You make a roadmap on where do you want to go from planning up to when do you want to do the auditing, when will you be trained for this, and then do careful monitoring. So through the team leaders, or if you have created a QMS team, You can already monitor what's happening, and then make sure that everything is documented, whether soft copy or hard copy. All the memorandum, all the designations should be signed, and then everyone should be aware that if it is not written, it didn't happen when it comes to ISO. So good documentation is very important. And assessment. Assess, do gap analysis, compare your performance before, and compare it against the ISO 9001 2015 standard. Once you are already trained through a foundation course or an orientation course with the clauses, these generic standards can certainly be applied in any organization. So just compare it with the requirements versus what is happening, with the requirements of the ISO as your criteria and your objective evidences as the proof that it is really happening. So the ISO journey is really unique for every organization, but you can control the pace. The question number 9 is, do we need a consultant? All right. So as you can see on the screen, there's a compass. In the implementation of an ISO 9001 2015 QMS, what you need is a guidance or a sort of a compass that will lead you towards the certification. Now, whether this can be found inside your organization, wherein you have your own quality assurance office or quality assurance personnel, or you need to get it from a training institution such as DAP, or you need a private individual to do this, all you need to remember is you need guidance in terms of number 1, the ISO 9001 2015 clauses. These are the standards which should be followed. So you can get a copy of this from the DTI or from DAP, and you can read about it from the internet. But of course, the interpretation can be different. The application in your organization may be different, so there must be guidance in terms of applying it in your organization. You should also need training and competence. Take note that in order for you to do internal quality audit, you should be trained. You should have a certificate in order to be considered as competent in that kind of area. So you need a trainer for the internal quality audit. There are also guidelines, the ISO 19011-2018 in terms of the guidance in the auditing of management systems. So you need that training as well. Now, third one would be you should have someone, whether inside your organization or outside, who should be looking after continual improvement. Now, you have a lot of things to improve after you have received your non-conformities, after you have realized that you have gaps in terms of your processes. Now, therefore, you need a continual improvement person who will be able to tell you this should be improved or suggest what are the things that should be revised, how can this be done better, and in fact, that person may compare it to implementers around the world so that you can be at par with international standards. And lastly, you need someone who will assess, someone from the outside or an outsider looking in, so that he or she can give an unbiased assessment of whether or not you were able to actually meet the basic requirements of ISO 9001 2015. Anyway, ISO gave us guidelines through ISO 10019-2005 regarding the selection of a quality management system consultant and the services of a consultant in that matter. So there, it's up to you, but the answer is that we need guidance if it is our first time, or we are sustaining the standard, or we have adjustments internally. So we need guidance. So what are the benefits of being ISO 9001 2015? This is the last question, since according to this session, ISO 9001 2015 implementation may sound challenging at first, but after doing everything, all the documentation, the audits, and all the stuff that happened for us to get that certification, what would be the gaps which were already bridged? And what are the gaps that were closed? Because during the implementation of ISO, we're able to transform the organization, improve the organization. So the first would be on having a quality policy, objective, and plan. Well, before, this may not be clear in the organization, but now you were able to define a quality policy some objectives, the targets are clear, and plans are now being utilized and followed, strictly followed. So there, the stakeholders will be happy because they are seeing results out of the organization. Number two would be the flow of information would be generally be clearer because you have installed documents and records control. Now, control of documented information is very important in QMS because it enhances organizational knowledge wherein anyone from anywhere can get the significant information needed for them to do the process properly. So this is one of the benefits of ISO. The third one would be the recurring transactional errors will be lessened because of the control for non-conforming services. When you are able to identify through internal audit certain situations, sometimes these are risks which already happened or may happen, there is a probability that this will not happen again or this will be controlled because this has been written or there was already a solution when it happened. So there is a slim chance that it will happen again. Therefore, the organization will just move forward and improve its processes. The fourth one, which is very, very important for organizations, is having clear procedures. Because standardization means that one office, the process of one office is clearly delineated from the process of another office. This steers more accountability among personnel, and the documented work procedures gives guidance not only to new employees but also to old employees or original employees in the organization who might be confused of what should they do, or because this was the thing that they were used to do. This time through ISO, there are specific procedures which will be followed. Therefore, you cannot just do anything you want because these documented processes should be followed strictly. And last one would be the lack of systems review and audit. Now, through ISO 9001:2015, there will be regularity in terms of checking what's happening in your organization because of the regular internal quality audit. Actually, this is a requirement that should be done at least once a year. So if you're checking yourself, and then this is like a checkup, a body checkup. So if you are checking your systems, if they are working well, if the ISO 9001:2015 standards are still being followed, well, truly, you can improve your organization well and your system as a whole. So there you have it. A quick introduction about ISO 9001:2015 QMS. I hope that you were able to gain more insights about the international standard, and this has motivated you to improve the quality of your services. With the proper and sustainable implementation of QMS, your internal customers or your employees, and most especially the people we serve, the Filipino people, will get what they truly deserve: quality service with world-class standards. And ISO 9001:2015 QMS is one of the keys to achieving it. Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. So my name is Gerard Calambro. We will be taking some questions from all of the participants. With us is our resource person, Mr. Earl Tongol, with our teammate, Mr. Michael Sarabia. And good afternoon, Earl. Good afternoon, Mike.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me, Gerard?
Yes, the signal is clear, so we can hear you.
All right.
So,
Mm-hmm,
first of all, we already sent out the poll. The question was, is your government agency ISO certified or currently undergoing certification efforts? So 91% of all the participants who voted are ISO certified. So that's a very high
Wow.
number, 91%
Yes, it's overwhelming. Yes,
are
yes.
ISO certified. So they have a knowledge already, we assume, on ISO QMS. So currently we have 3,409 live viewers in the entire country and also worldwide. So we already took their questions from the chat box. Right? So if you want to give us a brief introduction, or if you want to give a shout out to our
Yes, yes.
participants?
So yes, first of all, Gerard, thank you for and the AP also for giving me this chance to have an introduction. It's surprising that most of the organizations are already ISO certified, including some of our friends in governance. We want to greet the Philippine Air Force for 20th Supply Wing. Hello, PAF for 20, and of course the LGU of Pilar Sorsogon. Well, overwhelming you, the 91% is quite high. But it's just an introduction. So maybe they are again they want a refresher maybe, or some may have new employees which are actually required to sort of be oriented or be aware of ISO. So I hope that the session we had was gave them an idea, or in a nutshell gave them a briefer once again, a reminder of what ISO is all about. And even though we are in a pandemic, I hope the 91%, which is increasing actually, uh, are aware that they should continue promoting ISO, they should continue practicing ISO, even though we are in this pandemic. Mhm.
All right. So is that okay? So we can start with the question and answer portion already from
Mm-hmm.
the audience.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we'll start with the question from Miss Jubilee Lanza of the Department of Labor and Employment.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
She is asking how to renew the ISO certification. Should it be renewed every year?
Oh, okay. Yun na ba yun? Is that it, Gerard?
That's the question. It's just one sentence.
Okay, okay. So when it comes to the renewal or sort of recertification when it comes to ISO, the standard certification duration is 3 years. Now, if you get certified for the first time, you should have passed the first stage and second stage audit, and afterwards you will have several surveillance audits. Minimum would be once a year for the next 3 years. And after the third year, you would need to, yes, you called it renew. Yes, you would need to
Yes,
renew it
yes.
after 3 years. It's your option if you want to continue with your certifying or certification body as a partner. Now, take note that there is a renewal or transition. The reason is because first you may want to revisit again your certification, what improvements were done. The next one would be, of course, if you want to have a new partner. Since you're paying for the certification body as well, you should have experienced some value on that. So it is a good time to reflect on your certification body. And at the same time, the third reason for renewing would be there may be a new standard. Usually it comes 5 years or 8 years, but during the transition, you will have time to sort of rearrange your documents and align it with a new standard if there will be a new standard. So there, about 3 years, you should peg it at 3 years. Mhm.
All right. So Miss Grace Abad, I don't know her agency because
Mhm.
it was not stated in the chat box. So
Mhm.
she is asking, is there a training for online ISO accreditation and how
Mhm.
to be a certified online accreditor? So do you give
Oh.
training?
Okay, okay, that's very interesting. Actually, what we're doing in the during the normal times, what DAP was doing and until now are the same trainings that we have, whether it is given online. Now, the certification is of course given. The certified trainings are given by organizations which have accreditation from IRCA or are certified to train participants. So if we give a training, it would be for competency building, I guess, for as a consultant at a personal level and with DAP as well. What we can provide are capability building for the personnel. For certification, there are consultancy firms and there are private organizations that give the actual certification. So there are options. When it comes to online, take note that the online is just the methodology of introducing the topic, or it's just a learning method. So there is no specific certification to do training online in terms of ISO courses. But in terms of remote auditing, maybe that's also an idea. There are guidelines to be followed. So there, you may get some training, some certified trainings as well. But specifically for having it online, it's an online methodology.
All right. So another question from Diony Liu Jiao. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he is asking, why is preventive actions not included in the management reviews or internal audits under ISO 9001:2015? So,
Oh, that's a good question. Probably he's an engineer, or for those who are engineering graduates, yes. Actually, the one of the core reasons why we do ISO is because we want to prevent something from happening, and that preventive action is the typical terminology. Now, it didn't disappear. It's still present, but it is in the form of what we call risks and opportunities. Now, if you can see, if you will plan for preventive action, it is similar or even it's really synonymous or directly linked with risk management. Since when you prevent something from happening, for example, in a government agency, certain human errors are happening and you want to prevent this from happening again. So you will think about it during planning. So actually, the preventive action is still there. The terminology disappeared. They removed the word preventive action so as not to be redundant with risk management. So if you plan something ahead, actually it's easier. If you plan something ahead, if you know your risks, then you can prevent it from happening. So that's where preventive action comes in. Mhm.
all right. So very well said, sir. And
Mhm.
another question from Christopher, Mr. Christopher, and
Mhm.
he is asking, if internal audit conducted in our institution, who will answer the root cause analysis? Is it the auditee or the internal auditor?
Oh yes, yes, that's a common question also. So in
Mm-hmm.
that case, the analysis is done by the process owner or the auditee. So take note, remember that when you're an auditor, you're an outsider looking in. You can just call the NC based on the clauses, but the solution, the answer, the response should come from the process owner because we have a saying that the process owner knows best. He's the one working on it, and human nature itself says that if we push something which is something alien to the person or it is not what he is used to do, the change might be longer or it may not be applied. So the answer would be the process owner or the auditee will be the one to solve the problem and find the solution through root cause analysis.
Right, sir. So another relevant question during COVID-19 is the question from Miss Cecilia
Mm-hmm.
Montero. She asked, with this pandemic, how effective would it be if the accreditation is through online or long distance? So that's a very relevant question for today.
Correct, correct. Actually, this is already being done since the onset of the pandemic because I'll give you two perspectives. The first perspective would be continuing the certification with or without a pandemic. Now, we just experienced this in this generation, but in actuality, in private organizations also, even in normal times, there is something we call remote audit. Meaning, if there is danger or there are things which are confidential, maybe it's just that we're not used to it, but auditors may not be present in the actual area, but the auditing area, but it is possible. The second perspective would be the quality of audit. Of course, we will not have all the senses, all our five senses during the audit. We only have our sight and then hearing, but we cannot touch, we cannot see the actual situation in the audit area. So those are the cons of having a remote audit. But generally, if you want to continue improving, whether you are in the pandemic area or not, or in the situation, ISO encourages the continuation of certification. Now, you don't have to worry because you can talk to your certification bodies in terms of the extension. There are adjustments because if you really want a face-to-face audit, that can be possible since there are different arrangements depending on your certification body. So they can extend up to 6 months to 1 year, I guess, for the face-to-face. But for the first timers, there is really a need for the certification body to visit your office or a certain percentage of the area because it is their first time to audit. So those are the pros and cons. But we encourage you, the AP and also all the productivity practitioners encourage you to continue it if it is possible. Mhm.
All right. So can we take a few more questions, sir? If you
Of
may
course.
answer.
Yes,
Sure.
yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have another question from Andy Abdurrahman. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a very relevant question in an organizational level. So in a centralized organization where policies and directions are just coming or originating from the central office, would it
Mm-hmm.
be good for us at the lower level to proceed with our ISO journey, even if our central office is not yet an ISO certified organization? So
Uh,
how do they go about that,
mm.
sir?
Okay, we get that all the time from the bureaucracy, of course, the first thing to do, number one, is to go to your higher ups and, of course, ask permission. But with that fact aside, I guess the Development Academy of the Philippines and our oversight agencies, the Interagency Task Force for this, agrees that there should be unified implementation. Of course, some of the bureaus, some of the offices under the central office may go first, but it is the decision of their organization. Now, again, I will give you the pros and cons. Since it is, yes, it is technically possible to do that in terms of the budget given and, of course, the leadership in that certain area. And we encourage that. We do not discourage that, because if one part of the organization wants to improve, you cannot stop that, and ISO is for improvement. So what can the organization do? Number one, of course, to ask permission, and then to align it with the central office. We don't want advanced organizations to just implement it and then the central office will change it. We get that scenarios all the time. So before you implement, make sure that you refer to your central office in terms of your processes. Ask if it is possible. And if it is possible, you can be the pilot. You can be part of it, and then after that, your office can be the model of the implementation so that the other offices can follow. So for me, that is possible for as long as it is aligned with what is being done by the central agency or the headquarters.
All right, so we have another question since online learning is very relevant nowadays. So
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Moises from CHED is asking, for the conduct of the remote audit, does it need to be included in the document procedure for IQA, of will it just serve as a guideline for the auditors in conducting the remote audit?
Okay, that's another very good question for a certified organization. The first question, the first answer would be yes. It would be better if you already put it in your documented information. Now, in what form? You were asking if it is through your procedure, or number two, if it is just a guideline. Now, it depends on your organization if you want remote auditing to be a normal thing even after the pandemic. So even after the vaccine has arrived, okay, when everything is back to sort of the new normal or normal, will you have remote audits as a basis for auditing? So that's the first question. If you want that to happen after the pandemic, you want to be ready, your remote audit ready, meaning you have ICT capabilities and your organization is capable of doing remote audits, then put it in your procedure. And when it is just temporary for the next 6 months, you can have it as a guideline only. So both are correct, and you can decide on that whether you put it as a semi-permanent procedure or just a temporary procedure. When in fact we have the guidelines of ISO on that, so with or without writing it or making it a documented information that is permanent or in your procedure, you can always refer to the remote audit guidelines of ISO.
And we have a last question from Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Vincent, and he is asking, since they're already certified, what is the process of recertification? Will it be the
Mm-hmm.
focus of the audit in the view of the what will be the focus of the audit in the
Mm-hmm.
view of recertification?
All right. So the recertification actually first would be there would be a new contract on that. So on the third year, it will be a usual audit. It will be the same. There will be an opening meeting. You will be assessed according to your conformance with the standards, and they will give you a report, a final report on that, on whether or not you will be recertified, or that report will be handed over to the new certification body. So actually, there is no big difference. It's just that you should end the contract or the 3-year period through surveillance audits, and the last would be the recertification. There is only a difference if you have transition or you have new processes enrolled. So that would be a different story, wherein they will consider design and development, they will consider some equipment. But in terms of what really is the big difference, it is similar to a surveillance audit. It's just that the timing would be in the time wherein you have to recontract.
All right. So that's our final question, sir. If you want to have a closing statement, and if you
Mm-hmm.
have other tips with the agencies that are watching right now.
Mm-hmm. All right. So for everyone, I would like to thank DAP and of course the audience who were present here. We're more than 3,000. I am very overwhelmed. With this number of people, I guess many are still or many are still wants to be to sustain their certification. I guess the poll, we are already around 91%. So
Yes.
the 91% wants to continue, and the remaining 8% should be inspired, I hope, to move and go on to their certification, because even though it's a pandemic, it gives you an advantage if you're ISO certified. Of course, there may be budget which were allocated to the COVID-19, and that's we understand that. But of course, if you have allotted something, not just budget, but your efforts and your job functions are related to quality improvement, apply it to the pandemic. Apply it. The improvement can be applied to processes which directly lead towards improvement in terms of your frontline services in the time of pandemic. How can you improve your services even during the time of pandemic, and use ISO by doing that. So that's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Earl. And we hope that you enjoyed our webinar this afternoon. But stay tuned. We will be showing a video after this. And if you want to request for the certificates or the handouts, we will be sending also a link after the video. So please stay tuned. And my name is Gerard Calambro. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you again in the TSP webinars.